Hey guys, welcome back to That Handy Friend. Today we're going to be making a frame for this picture. I know the blue tape looks really good, but I think a nice wooden frame could look even better. This is an 18 by 24 print, so let's head to the shop and get cracking. So since we know that this painting is a 24 wide by 18 tall, I want to do a 2-inch thick frame, and I want 1 inch of overlap over the painting because there's about 1 inch of white space. So in order to figure out how big to make our frame, we're going to have our 2-inch frame minus our overlap, which is going to give us 1 inch. And then we're going to be adding that 1 inch to all sides of our painting. So that means our 24 inches wide is going to have an inch added to the right and to the left. So that's going to become 26 inches. And likewise with our height, we're going to have top and bottom each 1 inch. So that comes in at 20 inches. So that 26 by 20 is going to be the outside dimension of our frame. We want to make sure we don't cut any of our lumber smaller than that until we're ready. So now that we know our dimensions, I grabbed this piece of 5/4 cherry, and it's clocked in at about 4.5 inches wide and 48 1/4 long. That's going to be perfect for our 4 pieces of wood at 2 inches wide each. I did put a line here at 21 1/4. I'm going to split it there, and then I'll cut my 2-inch planks out of those two 21-inch piece and the 27-inch piece that I'm cutting this into. Once I have those cut, I can really refine it with my miters and make sure that I get it absolutely perfect. But I like to leave them a little bit long in this step just so I have some room to wiggle if I need to change something down the road. Now that I'm ready to rip these, there's one thing I want to point out, and it's the wood that I want to use on this. So to start with, this is S3S, so one side is rough sawn, the other side's nice and smooth. This is my flat reference edge. I want to run this up against my fence on my saw so that I can make sure I get nice straight cuts from the saw. If you run this side, you're going to get some wobbly cuts. The second thing is I don't want to use any of this wood. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have some of that, but it can be on the back side, because if we're cutting at 2 inches, I mean, obviously 4 is right there. So if it's on the back side, we're not going to notice it. So I'm going to go ahead and rip my 2-inch pieces from this side and then another 2-inch piece this way, and then this will just be our scrap with whatever of this wood remains. This is how I'm going to be removing that bow out of these boards. So this is a jig that I made a while ago, and it's just a board with a piece of wood on the bottom that rides in the track of the saw, and it's flush up against the blade. So all I did was I took one of my boards here, and I have it so it's bowed like this, so that the high spot is up against the blade right now. So I have a little bit of a lip right here, and a little bit of a lip right here. So when I push this through, it's going to shave off the front and the back of this. And then I can swap, because this is my other board. I'm using it because it's the same height, so it works to hold these down. I'm going to swap these two boards. I'm going to do the same thing, and then I'll do the same with those two. And once I have flat surfaces on the back sides of 4 of these, I can then set my fence back up, and I can rip the face flush as well. So then they'll be perfectly parallel. So this is what they all look like right now. I finished up using my jig on one side. And you can see if I squeeze, we get some pretty good gaps. So let's see what happens after I surface them with the saw using the fence now, since it's all set up for that. All right, here they are fresh off of the saw. So let's do that same test. I'll squeeze this end. And that, I would say, I mean, that's probably the worst of it, and that's about, I don't know, a little shy of a 16th. Not even. I'm gonna call that good. There might even be some stuck in here. It's a bunch of little pieces of Jeech. So now we got to start thinking about the rabbets that we want to cut in this. And all that that means is out of this piece of wood, let's say it looks like this. We want to cut this out. That section is our rabbet. That's going to be where the picture sits and where the glass sits and the backer. This will be the front of the frame, and that'll be the side. So this will be the back side. And we want to cut the rabbets out now because that allows us to do it on the table saw. I'm going to set the table saw up to make one of these cuts, and we're going to cut all 4 boards in that direction, and then we're going to set it up to make the other cut, and we're going to cut all 4 in that direction, and then we should have a nice clean rabbet. I like to orient all my boards in the same direction, so that way I don't have to think about which way they're going through when I'm running them through the saw. I can just push them through one after the other. All of the rabbets cut, we can now go ahead and cut our miters on the ends to final length. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this cut first. I'm not going to measure anything. I'm just going to make sure it's perfect on the corner, nice and sharp at a 45. And then from that cut, I can measure and get my final dimension. That's what we want to see. I'm going to show you how I sneak up on the corner here. So I had to do a little bit of refining, and now that I have these two cut, I got my saw dialed in. I got these two butted up to each other. You can see, so it's hard to tell, but that's a perfect 90. So make sure you check before you cut everything, and especially if you're cutting it to length, you really want to make sure that you're cutting it the correct angle when you're cutting it to length, or you're going to have some really bad looking miters. So we've got our first cuts, the ones that we laid out, all done. And I like to lay out the frame kind of how it's going to start looking. You can see I still have the square ends here and here. So now we can actually cut to length. And I like to mark these AA and CC. Obviously it's going to be A, B, C, D. And I do that just to keep myself organized because I definitely will get these mix matched and messed up. So I'm going to measure these to the length that I want on the outside edge, you know, from here down. I'm going to cut it just a hair long. I'll probably cut it like a 16th to an 1/8 long, and then I'll sneak back up and clean it up again just to make sure that it's as perfect as it can be. All right, so everyone's been cut, so now I'm just going to try and line them up and see how it looks. All right, I'm going to throw some tape on these joints so I can really see what it looks like. So I just have a little piece of blue tape holding each corner together so I can see kind of what the frame looks like all put together. And it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. Even though I had to fight with it a little bit in the miters, they all came out pretty tight. My worst one is probably this right here. And it looks worse than it is because it's not really lined up, but for some reason there's like a little bit of a gap in the middle of it there. I don't know what happened there, but I will just fill it in. It's not the end of the world. And now I'm just gonna kind of measure and make sure everything is still square. To do that, and this isn't gonna be perfect because, like I said, the frame's just taped together right now, but we're gonna measure. Let's see, right now we are at 32 and 15/16 on that corner to that corner, and then from these two, we are at, well, we're at 33. That's pretty square. So it's only out by a 1/16 of an inch, and I can fix that up when I glue it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to glue all this stuff up, tape it back up, and then I'm going to let it dry overnight, and I'll pick this back up tomorrow. Is covered in glue. The gap on this one's meh. But I'm going to throw a clamp across the middle of this, and then 2 clamps there to kind of keep some tension on this. And I want you to pay attention. This is really not necessary. You can do this with the tape, but I like to just do the clamps. I am putting little to no pressure on these. I am putting just enough to see a smidge of squeeze out. And that's it. So like, it's grabbing it, but it's not crushing it. I'm not going ham on this, because you don't want to change the geometry of everything. And before this all sets, I am going to measure it one more time just to make sure it's still square. Alright, we're at 33 in both corners, so I think that's pretty good. Alright, that's it for tonight. I'm going to let this sit until tomorrow, and then we can get back on it. Now that everything's had a chance to dry, let's pop these clamps off and have a look at it. So we'll start the back side. A joint looks alright. B joint's okay. It didn't quite line up inside here perfectly. C joint's okay. There's a smidge of a gap. D joint's alright. So this is what she's looking like right now. I am going to do some sanding. I'm just going to use an orbital, and I'm going to go up through the grits, and then we can spray some finish. These are the 3 grits I'm going to use. I'm going to start with the 100, step up to 150, and then finish on 220. Now that I started sanding, I forgot. I wanted to put splines in these corners. So let's do that before we finish sanding. To make these splines, sometimes you can use different color wood, accent wood, if you want to. I am actually just going to use some of my scrap from this project. I don't care if it is the same color or not. So I have the table saw set up here to be just about as thick as the blade. And I don't have, I forget what they're called, chisel tooth, flat top, whatever. I'll look it up. Blade that makes a nice square cut. Mine makes kind of a W-shaped cut, and I'm okay with that. This is a jig that I'm slapping together to do this job real quick. It's not gonna be pretty, but it's gonna work for this one time. I used to have a jig for this. I don't know what happened to it, but I will just make this one real quick and we'll go ahead and use it. Alright, now I want to make one cut on this. One cut only, so I want to make sure that it's set up right. 1 9/16. That's where I want my fence to be set. And that's how you know your math was wrong. Because I didn't actually account for where I wanted my splines to be. I accounted for how wide my actual frame was. So, not the worst mistake in the world, but I am going to have to fix it. 5, 6, 7. Now that should be accurate. Let's do that cut again. That looks a lot better. That looks a lot better. So now let's measure. It's exactly 1/2 inch from the back, which honestly is pretty good. That's about where I want it. It's not exactly where I want it, but it's good enough. Next I need to get my height, because I don't want my splines to come in here. Alright, I'm going to set the height now, and to do that I have my spline here. I'm going to slide this back over the blade, set my spline up right in front of it here, and then I'm going to sight down it. And I want to make sure my blade is shorter than my spline, so it sticks out just a bit on the board. Otherwise I'll have a divot. So that's where I want my blade to be set. Now let's clamp up our work and run it through. Now we have a hole cut, or a groove cut for our spline, and our spline fits right in there. Beauty. That's perfect. Let's cut 3 more. So I got 4 of these cut. These are my splines. They just lock in. See, they're gonna go in there. I'm just gonna glue these in real fast, and then we'll come back when they're dry. Now that these bad boys are all dry, I'm going to cut them off and sand this frame up. Alright, now that I've thrown a light round over on all of the edges, except for these inside edges, don't do those with a power sander because you're going to burn through the corners really fast. I did all these loose. I'm just going to finish them up by hand. I just took the disc off. I'll finish off this disc, smoothing these corners out and kind of making them look a little bit more natural. Alright guys, look what we got here. Check this out. We've got the frame back after getting 3 coats of finish sprayed on it. You can see it's kind of got a slight gloss to it. It's a semi-gloss finish compared to just a raw piece of scrap wood here. I just used this polyacrylic clear satin finish, and I sprayed it on thin coats. It came out really nice. I'm happy with the way this looks. All our miters are looking all right. That's probably the worst one. So now we're ready to throw the picture in this thing and get it on the wall. Well, here it is, all finished and hung on the wall, and I think it came out amazing. I'm very happy with how all of my miters look, and I think that that color of cherry wrapped around that picture really accents well. I did use a piece of acrylic instead of glass because I didn't want to have to worry about it breaking and getting glass all over the floor / couch. But I hope you guys enjoyed this process, and I hope you enjoyed the finished product. So please like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.